Well, it's no secret that relations between the U.S. and Israel have been strained. They certainly were under the Obama administration. But earlier today, both President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu voiced confidence that our alliance will only grow stronger during this new era. Roll tape.
One of the worst deals I've ever seen is the Iran deal.
Under your leadership, I believe we can reverse the rising tide of radical Islam.
I'd like to see you hold back on settlements for a little bit. Doesn't sound too optimistic, but that's... He's a good negotiator.
That's the art of the deal.
So I'm looking at two-state and one-state, and I like the one that both parties like. So as far as the embassy moving to Jerusalem, I'd love to see that happen.
There is no greater supporter of the Jewish people and the Jewish state than President Donald Trump.
Here to discuss Katie Freites, Oren Kessler, and Eric Erickson. Oren, let me start with you. A lot of ground actually covered in that relatively short press conference. It's still some questions out there, but it's pretty obvious that these two men have a lot of respect for each other, and that should give us all renewed hope that some of these age-old problems maybe could be resolved.
Well, it's no secret that Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Obama did not get along at all, and the body language whenever those two leaders met was palpably tense. The body language and sort of the tone of voice that we saw today between Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Trump couldn't have been more different, even if there were one or two instances in which they seemed to be speaking in sort of different directions or on a slightly different wavelength. I think it was clear that they're comfortable in one another's presence, and that it does feel like
right.
a new sort of era between the two leaders may begin.
Katie, one of those areas where they didn't seem to be on the same page was with respect to settlements. Of course, a lot of people were surprised a couple of weeks ago when President Trump actually seemed hesitant with regard to the settlements. What do you make of that? I'm not sure it's a game changer per se, but obviously is relevant.
Right. Well, I think first off, it's really refreshing to see Israel, which has been such a long-standing ally of ours, have that relationship refreshed in a meaningful way. But also in terms of the settlements, Trump did say, hold back for a little bit. But I think the media is trying to make something out of this that it's not. I mean, look at what John Kerry, when he was Secretary of State, said. He said that Judaism and democracy cannot coexist under a one-country policy. And that's to say that, and then to come back to this and say there's something here, there's something wrong with Trump, there's a tension between him and Netanyahu, when you had such intense rhetoric coming from John Kerry, I think that's totally false. Trump has been a defender of Israel for a very long time. Him and Netanyahu have been friends for a very long time. So I think people are making a lot more of this than there was. Yeah,
you know, Eric, I love what Katie's saying, because there's one thing about the United States helping to facilitate an eventual agreement, and another, well, that's setting the parameters. The UN, in fact, today coming out and reiterating that Kerry thing where there must be a two-state resolution.
Well, you know, first of all, I'd like to note how badly the media got it today. I was getting push alerts on my phone that Donald Trump had come out in favor of the one-state solution. When you listen to his quote, he says, I like the one that they both like. Listen, the president of the United States is not going to be able to dictate terms to the Israelis or the Palestinians. I did think it was encouraging that Mahmoud Abbas came out today and liked some of what the president said about the settlement situation and proceeding for peace. But ultimately, I'm a skeptic that we're ever going to have peace in the Middle East between Israel and the Palestinians.
Well, Oren, if that is indeed the case, of course, the subject of Iran was brought up again. You know, this is I don't know if they've ever been this strong. They certainly have been enriched. They're on their way toward getting a nuclear weapon. At some point, perhaps the United States will have to come to the aid of Israel and others in the Middle East because of a belligerent Iran.
Right. Well, I think one of the remarks that President Trump made today that most pleased Prime Minister Netanyahu was that Iran will never, ever get a nuclear weapon. And it's true that Prime Minister Netanyahu has been pushing for a sort of new regional policy or paradigm whereby Israel and the Sunni Arab states find that they are increasingly finding that they have common ground in terms of the shared threat that Iran poses.
Right.
And I think that's one of the things that Trump and Netanyahu have been discussing today.
Katie, what did you make of that? Because when they talked about these new allies or potential allies, I thought that was a hidden nugget in all of this, because it is a regional conflict that ultimately Israel is going to need some help, I would think, to help along with America to push back against.
Right. I think it was actually very tactful, most of Trump's rhetoric. He stayed pretty neutral. He didn't really upset one side or the other. He gave them both little tidbits that they could chew on for a while and stew over. And that's very different from the rhetoric he often gives, that's intense, it's to the point, and it's right in your face. And of course, this is a conflict that's probably not going to get solved anytime soon. So for him to come out swinging with that, he had a gentle hand, which I think was important. And I actually thought it was pretty hysterical when he did tell Netanyahu, hold back a little bit, hold back. Maybe he is starting to take his own advice a little bit and hold back a little bit in what he's saying.
Well, it's in the art of the deal, right? At least that's
Right?
what they both admitted to. Well, it's good to see America and Israel on a much friendlier terms for everyone. Guys, thank you all very much. Appreciate it.
Thanks.